Hello, Candace here again. Before we dive into a conversation with the brilliant Hena Khan, author of many wonderful books for children and teens, including Under My Hijab, I have the pleasure of telling you about her forthcoming picture books with Lee and Low, Zane's Super Friday and Behind My Doors. Early Friday morning, Zain leaps out of bed, ready to save the world from alien invaders. But his dad has other plans for Zain on this special day of the week. Dad takes Zain to the mosque and guides him through his first Jummah prayers. Zain's search for a superhero adventure leads to supersized distractions, but the Imam welcomes Zain's playful energy and invites him to lead the prayers with him. Zain comes to appreciate this special time with his father and their community. And in a fun, heartwarming moment, Zain and his dad find the action adventure that Zain's been looking for. Young readers will connect with Zain's vibrant imagination, as well as his enthusiasm for superheroes and aliens. For non-Muslim readers, the book serves as a friendly introduction to a Muslim practice that's observed all around the world. Come learn about the world's oldest operating library in Behind My Doors. Told from the perspective of the library itself, this beautifully illustrated story offers young readers an engaging, kid-friendly look at the history of an important landmark. Our story takes place in Fez, Morocco in 859, when a young woman named Fatima El-Fihri had the bold idea to build a school and library in her community. For centuries, notable scholars filled the library's reading rooms where they discussed, debated, and made discoveries about the world. After many, many years, the library fell into disarray until another young woman, architect Aziza Shawnee, and her team restored the building. With rich illustrations, Behind My Doors highlights the contributions of Muslim scholars and their belief that education should be available to all. Some of the most important transfers of knowledge between North Africa and Europe throughout the Middle Ages is attributed to this very library. This gorgeous book celebrates the importance of libraries as a place of discovery, learning, and community. And now I'm excited to turn the mic over to Booklist editor Sarah Hunter and the talented Hena Khan.
Thank you so much. And Hena, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
So we'll just jump right into the questions. We'll talk first about Zane's Super Friday. Kids don't always get affirming experiences in religious spaces, especially energetic kids. Can you talk about why it was important to you to show an energetic kid participating in a prayer service?
Sure, yeah. And I should add that my pronouns are she, her, and also I'm a South Asian woman with tan skin, long, dark, curly hair, and dark frame glasses. And I'm wearing a melon-colored blouse and sitting in front of bookcases, like many of us, filled with colorful children's books. But to answer your question about, why I chose to write about kids and, this energetic kid in a prayer service, in the Muslim tradition, kids, and like so many others, kids do spend a lot of time at the mosque and just participate in these rituals from a very young age. And there's always a group of little ones, running around the back of the mosque, especially during congregational prayers. And it's sort of this community responsibility to take turns shushing them. And it's this test of patience really for the parents and the elders around trying to focus and pray. And of course, for the children themselves to, try to keep still and not get shushed or told to sit down. So it is this little bit of a tug of war that we see a lot of times. But, people love having the children there in spite of the disruption, because it is part of the process of them, learning to feel at home in the mosque and feeling welcome. And of course, becoming familiar with the actual steps of the prayer. And I personally know so many kids. I feel like it's a rite of passage for so many children to go through a superhero obsessed phase, where they imagine themselves to be whoever it is and to have all these powers. And so I very much had one particular friend in mind when I drafted this book, and thought it just would add another layer to appreciate what's going on in the story, but also be able to relate to, that idea of wanting to run around and play and having to put that on pause while you go through these various, stages of observance of this ritual. That's very special to the community.
Yeah, for sure. So I know that picture book authors don't often get much say in illustrations. And the illustrations in Zane's Super Friday are very playful. And I'm wondering if there was anything about the artwork that surprised you or helped you see new elements in the story that you didn't anticipate.
Yes, actually, totally. I love the art. I love how vibrant and energetic and colorful it is. And it's always super fun to see the way an illustrator brings themselves to the story and adds elements of their own. And Under My Hijab, we saw the way that Aaliyah added butterflies on every page, for example, which was something that was a really welcome surprise. And in this book, I just love the way that Nez decided to make the bad guys that we had included in the books as these alien invaders, and she includes this very clever childlike hand drawn, well, it's hand drawn, but like a child's hand drawn alien figures and spaceships and things like that. And we actually changed the text as a result of seeing the art, because I had originally had it being Zain and his looking to battle, whatever these undescribed bad guys were. And I love the fact that she made them aliens, and we ended up, changing it to reflect that. And similarly, she also had this a sonic transmitter on Zane's wrist, where you see it saying fun words, which is great because we also wanted him to have some sort of gear. And initially, I had written it as a sonic blaster, but when she illustrated it as this blaster of like sound on the kid's wrist, we changed it to a sonic transmitter. And I really love that because it allowed us to avoid including anything that looked more like a weapon, which I didn't want, and we were sort of wrestling with. So all in all, it's so fun to see, the story come alive, and then all these layers, and luckily I was able to see it as it progressed and give a little bit of input, when it was, but her vision and her energy for the stories, comes through, and I love it.
One thing I really appreciated about her artwork is the way that like childlike drawing style entered into the mosque as well. And it was present in Zayn like putting on the shoes in the hallway in front of the entrance. And so all of that like childlike energy that's really big and powerful at the end is still integrated throughout the prayer service, even if he's supposed to be like tamping it down just a little bit.
Totally. I love that. Yeah. And it's a good like carry throughout, where you see like how he's seeing things in this very superhero-y way, which is so fun. Love it.
So in general, in picture books, it's rather rare to see religious services depicted, especially in such detail. But for a lot of children, as you mentioned, it's a routine part of their experiences in their everyday lives. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the value of acknowledging kids' experiences of religion and faith in picture books just across the board.
Yeah. So, I do think it is something that is central to so many people's lives in different ways. And I know over the years, as I've published different books that, touch on religion in different ways, or express, Muslim life in particular, and traditions, I meet so many kids who will share how they can relate, like my family goes to church, or this reminds me of my synagogue, or whatever it is. It is such a huge part of so many people's experience. And I think for Muslim kids in particular, it is very routine. A lot of the things that we do in our religious life are just very intertwined with our daily lives. So even the fact that Muslims have, 5 times a day prayer, it just punctuates your day. The whole month of Ramadan is, an entire month of your life that is devoted to this special time. And then throughout the day, you may say special words or phrases. And so it's just very integrated into life, as it is for so many people. And I think the beauty of being able to share these traditions is that sense of community that you build, the understanding, you're really honoring these experiences as special parts of people's lives, but then also as parts of communities that treasure these things and do them together. And really just the idea of just fostering respect, for me, appreciation, and really above anything, like understanding of something that maybe even if you're not familiar with, why it means so much to people, or how it works. And hopefully that just helps people understand each other better.
Yeah, and I also think there's a lot of power in recognizing some similarities across
Mhm.
religious traditions as well. I know when I was a kid in a church and was bored and kicking my feet on the pew, I feel like I could see that in Zayn as well.
I love that. Yeah, the boredom is what unites us all as children.
Hmm.
For sure. And that's also part of it for me, is this the demystification in a way. Of course,
Hmm.
I'm writing this book for Muslim kids to be seen and included, and to be able to relate to these stories, but I want other people to recognize themselves and see themselves in it too. And I love that. I love that we all have that, sort of. One of my favorite spreads in the book is when Zayn is sitting on the carpet listening to the imam, and you see his different expressions of boredom, because I was just like, yes, that was me as a kid. And hopefully lots of people can relate to that.
Hmm. Wonderful. So I'd like to shift our focus now to Behind My Doors. Excuse me. It's a fascinating story of the Al Qarawiyyan Library, and I'm wondering if you can tell us what drew you to it in the first place.
Yeah. So I actually first learned of the mosque, actually, that is affiliated with the university and library, the Al Qarawiyyan Mosque, when I heard about Fatima Al-Fihri, and it was actually in this book. I'll show you. It's Muslim Heritage in Our World. It's 1001 Inventions that I got in the early 2000s, I think. And it's, this thick volume that talks about all the contributions of Muslim scholars and thinkers and so on. But the Fatima Al-Fihri part is this tiny footnote in the back of like influential Muslim people. And there she is. It's just a little blurb about her. And when I came across it, I thought, oh my goodness, the oldest operating university in the world was founded by a Muslim woman. Like, that is a fact that not that many people know. And that sort of goes counter to what the Western perception often is of Muslim women. And so I felt like that was a story that just needed to be told. And I just wasn't sure how to do it, because there was very little known about Fatima Al-Fihri, other than that she had inherited this enormous amount of wealth from her father and had decided to build this mosque that went on to become this university, that she herself was a big reader and student, and so on. But apart from that, I was like, well, I don't know much about her. And then I also thought about, for a picture book, which is what I wanted, since it's such a beautiful space, I didn't know if children would necessarily relate to the idea of a university, in the way that I, as an adult, was so excited to learn this. And so when I learned many years later, so it was always in the back of my mind, I really would love to tell this story. And then when I came across news stories about the restoration of the library, then I was like, it all just came together. And I thought, okay, here's a story I've been wanting to tell for years. And the library, just drove it home for me, because I was a library kid. It was such a huge part of my childhood. And I thought that was my chance to make it really personal. And then the restoration process was so fascinating, in the fact that there were two women involved, not just the founder, but also the person who came in to save this library from ruin, just made it that much more exciting for me to tell. So it was definitely a long process to find the story and to decide how to tell it.
Well, so tell us a little bit about your research into the building. Was there anything you learned that you wish you could have included but didn't have space for?
So yes, for sure, because it was such a fascinating history, and so long, right? Like spanning 1200 years. And when you're trying to write a picture book that's somewhere around 500 words, it's like, what do I include? And I definitely tried to keep the focus of the story on the library itself. As you mentioned, it's told from this perspective of the library itself, and that idea of this long journey and survival. But this research really, just all of the expansion of the building over the years. And I include this in the author's note as well, that the architect who did the restoration talked about how fascinating it was, because there weren't blueprints. It sort of grew organically over the centuries. And even when they were restoring it, she said it was sort of like being on an expedition, and like Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that, where you just kept uncovering different hidden rooms and things like that. So the magic of that was just so fascinating. And then, of course, even what Candace mentioned earlier, that amazing transfer of knowledge that happened between, North Africa and Europe at a time where really, Europe for part of that time was, in the dark age, what we call the dark ages. And there was this flourishing of knowledge and research and science happening, just not so far away, right? Across the Strait of Tangier. And so that's just amazing to me. But I was happy to be able to touch on each of these themes in the book, but of course, those could each be their own volume, I guess. And there are researchers there digging deeper into those things, but it is all just so fascinating. And the restoration itself, like the actual mechanics of restoring a building, I found really fascinating too, like diverting a river that's flowing underneath it. How do you do that? Because water and books certainly don't mix.
Maybe you have to write a sequel now.
Maybe, yeah, that'd be great.
So you wrote this book in the first person from the library's perspective, and I'm wondering what you think makes a library alive.
Yeah, so I thought about that a lot, when I was deciding how to present this. And, for me, really, as somebody who loves a library, I think about it has to be that spirit of learning and discovery and the love for books. And the part of the book that I love the most is when the library is sad and yearning for the walls to buzz with the energy of learning again, and the sharing and the discussion and the debate and the pursuit of knowledge that used to happen in those walls. And when it doesn't happen, you see them just sort of declining and withering and feeling sad and wishing for it. And I just feel like it's such a different feeling. I think we're all book people, right? I think everybody who's tuned in hopefully is a book person. And we know, like, we love the hush of the library and the collective energy that comes from brains at work, being stimulated. And it's such a special feeling. And I like to think of that, like our collective brain power, sort of fueling the library and keeping it alive. And it's so different than being in a room with a bunch of people on their phones, right? It's just not the same. It's not the same energy that you get from people immersed in books. And so I think that's what libraries need to be alive, really, like the patrons and of course budgets. So on your libraries, but I think that love of the library and that collective energy is really what I like to think is keeping them alive.
Yeah, for sure. The energy of people coming together in one place from all over a city.
Yeah, and a singular purpose, right? You're just there
Mhm.
to learn something or be, find yourself in a book some way.
Mhm. Wonderful. I think a lot of people here would agree with you that that's what keeps a library alive, but also that they also really need library funding.
Absolutely, especially now more than ever.
Yeah. Um, so what is so appealing for you about writing for children in particular?
So I think, it's just a joy to get to write about the things that I care about.
Mm.
And I heard you mention it earlier in the presentations, like other authors talking about wanting the books that they wish they had as a kid. And so that's definitely part of it for me too. But, I just feel so lucky that I get to write about the things that I cared about when I was a kid, but also the things I still care about now. And hopefully get to explore those ideas and themes and stories in a way that's appealing to both children and adults. And I think the beauty of getting to write for kids is that you reach more than just kids.
Mhm.
Hopefully you're reaching the people reading these books to them and sharing the books with them. And then I just love the simplicity of the storytelling for kids. It's not fussy, it's not pretentious, it's just good storytelling. And the fact that kids are so receptive and such a wonderful, eager, thoughtful audience, that just makes it so rewarding the times I get to interact with them and get their reactions and see what they gain from the books. That's just magical to me, like to see it come full circle. And the finished product, of course, is amazing, but then the reader is what it's all about.
That's wonderful. What were the books that made you want to become a writer in the first place?
Well, so I was, like I mentioned, I was a library kid. So I spent a lot of my childhood at my local public library, but I also had a small collection of books at home that I read and reread, and I still think of those books. I had this illustrated book of fairy tales. I had Richard Scarry's Best Word Book Ever, where I used to just lay on my carpet and open that book up and just imagine stories with those characters, those pigs at the grocery store or the rabbits farming, whatever it was. And it was such great, I don't know, like ingredients, like a recipe for storytelling, to have that sort of set up that way. I had a copy of Charlotte's Web and a few of the Little House books out of order. And then there were the books that I used to check out from the library over and over again, like all of the Ramona Quimby books and A Wrinkle in Time. And it's interesting to look back now and realize how different all of the books were that I read. I wasn't specific to or loyal to a particular genre. Like, I read really widely. But the common thing about all of them was that they all just made me feel safe and, like really immersed in their world during the time that I was reading them. And I think that's what I really look for when I write now, is to capture that feeling of just being safe and in a story that holds your attention and makes you wish that you were there. Because I felt like that's often the way I felt about the books I was reading, that I just wanted to be in those pages and just live there for a little while.
It's funny you mention Richard Scarry's Best Word Book Ever, because my 3.5-year-old has that book and she does the same thing. She lays on the floor, she's got the book out in front of her, and she's like paging through and like looking at all the little individual characters and what they're doing in their day.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, so I mean, it's, is it a universal activity? Probably not, but I think it's probably really, really common even for kids now. It's really
Oh,
funny, the staying power of that book. I know
yeah.
exactly what you mean about those little characters just feeling so, um, I don't know, not quite familiar, but just like um, malleable, maybe.
Mhm,
Just like
mhm.
these are things that I can think about that you can play with, sort of like playing with blocks.
Right, totally. Yeah. And I remember like the supermarket scene, like thinking like, what would I
Mhm.
want to eat if I went
Yeah.
to, which fruits would I pick out of these bins, or, things like that. And definitely sparking imagination. And
Hmm.
I still love looking at it. I've
Yeah.
seen it now. Like, I should more often. Maybe I'll get new
Yeah.
ideas.
I look at it all the time.
It's a classic. If you haven't seen it, make sure you get your hands on a copy.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful book.
Um, so tell us about some children's book writers or illustrators who you think deserve wider attention and acclaim today.
Oh, that's a tricky one, because I think there's so many. And as we all know, it's so much harder and getting harder for writers to get their books sold. Um, and not only published, but then of course like to sell copies. And I just feel like more and more, um, I'm so grateful for what Lee and Low is doing. And I feel like in the wider world, it just seems that book publishing is becoming more and more about celebrity and platform, and who you are, or what TikTok what TikTok following you have, than necessarily how good of a writer or storyteller you are. And that trend, I think, is really terrifying to see.
Mm,
um because of course, as a diverse author writing for a diverse publisher, who's I'm on the board of We Need Diverse Books, and I just feel like the writers who are doing the hard work of sharing the stories that we have not had for far too long just universally need to be getting more attention,
mm,
somehow. And I feel like it's hard when you have, like I said, like the celebrity books, or like the same um, bestsellers that are dominating the lists, or the stores. But I feel like, as and you all know this better than me probably, but I think we need more Arab American, Native American, Pacific Islander authors specifically, but we need more of everybody.
mm,
And I know so many amazing writers making beautiful books, but I would say that just overall, as a community of readers and book lovers, we just need to look a little deeper and beyond the bestseller lists and all the lists that are created and the awards, and really talk to librarians and booksellers about the books that they're excited about, and the ones that they really value, and the ones that they see kids are getting excited about. And that's amazing, like to get those recommendations, or to see, a school librarian say, I saw a child go over and pick up that book and like hug it to her chest, and like that is like, oh, but you can't quantify that or necessarily, put that on a list. But I feel like there's so many, it's hard to name specifics because I would feel guilty for leaving so many other people out. But I mean, amazing talent. And people who've been doing it for 20 years, and debuts coming out now, like across the gamut. You've got all sorts. But yeah, I think we need to be a little bit careful, because I think social media is, it's a blessing and a curse in a way, because I think it does sort of feed us what we like, and then you get in that trap. And I think we just all have to try to like look a little broader. and I think, of course, everything, not because you invited me, but because I truly believe it, and I'm honored to be published by Lee and Low. But I think you are putting out amazing books by amazing writers, and I feel like all of them deserve a lot more attention and acclaim.
So I know that library workers love it when people ask them for book recommendations, especially if it's a book that they are personally excited about. That's information that everybody likes to share. So have more conversations and spend less time on the internet. Is my thought about
Booksellers
it.
too, right? Booksellers
Yeah.
love hearing, like, getting and conversations. I've been at bookstores where somebody comes in asking, like, my daughter's this type of reader, or my niece is this type of reader, and I'd love to get something new. And they have a list of things they like, and it's not necessarily the one you would think. They're not only pushing Diary of a Wimpy Kid or whatever, like somebody would find at Target. And they've got really thoughtful recommendations, and they do know what's coming out, what's been successful, like with kids specifically, not just commercially.
Yeah. And I also know that a library worker would love to have that kind of interaction right now, as opposed to another kind of interaction. And they also like really good feedback. So be nice to your librarian. That's another good piece of advice.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you again, Hena, for this wonderful conversation. It's been a pleasure talking to you.